The rider reined in sharply at the edge of the field, the horse snorting and tossing its head. The man's gaze swept over FaoWind, sharp and assessing. "You!" The voice was rough, accustomed to command. "Are you FaoWind of the DragonFire name?" FaoWind rested his hoe, leaning on the handle. His heart gave an unexpected thump against his ribs. "I am FaoWind," he answered, his own voice sounding slow and thick after the labor. He omitted the clan name. It meant little here in the mud and sun. The messenger dismounted fluidly. He reached into a saddlebag and produced a rolled scroll, sealed with dark wax bearing the same griffin crest. He strode across the turned earth, his boots sinking slightly, leaving clean-edged prints FaoWind would later have to smooth over. He stopped a pace away, holding out the scroll. "By command of King Valerius, you are summoned to the capital, immediately." FaoWind stared at the scroll, then at the messenger's hard face. He made no move to take it. Summoned to Stonehaven? Why? His mind felt as muddy as the field. Kings did not summon dirt farmers. The messenger's expression did not soften. "The king's reasons are his own. The king's command is yours to obey." He thrust the scroll closer. "You will present yourself at the citadel gates within 3 days. Do you understand?" FaoWind took the scroll. The parchment felt stiff, important, utterly alien in his dirt-caked hand. The wax seal was cool against his thumb. "But my fields, the harvest." "Find someone else," the messenger said flatly, already turning back to his horse. "The king awaits." He swung himself into the saddle with practiced ease. Without a backward glance, he spurred the horse and was gone in another cloud of dust, leaving FaoWind standing alone amongst the potato plants, the king's summons clutched in his hand, the scent of horse and leather sharp in the air, replacing the familiar smell of earth. He looked down at the seal, the griffin seeming to glare back at him. DragonFire. The name tasted strange in his thoughts, like an old story suddenly made real. The last rays of the sun bled through the single grime-streaked window of FaoWind's small cottage, painting the rough-hewn table and packed earth floor in hues of orange and fading gold. Outside, the crickets began their nightly chorus. Inside, the smell of wood smoke mingled with the sharp scent of onions, sizzling in a cast-iron pan over the low hearth fire. FaoWind moved with the ingrained economy of a man long accustomed to solitude and simple living. He chopped potatoes, smaller ones salvaged from the day's work, with methodical thuds of his knife against the wooden board. Each chop echoed the unease thrumming beneath his ribs. The king's summons lay on the edge of the table, the wax seal seeming to catch the dying light, a dark eye watching him. He scraped the potatoes into the pan alongside the onions, the hiss and pop momentarily distracting. He stirred them with a wooden spoon, his gaze distant. King Valerius, he thought curiously. The summons had named him king. FaoWind frowned, stirring the sizzling vegetables. He knew Valerius only as the prince. Whispers had eventually reached even his remote corner. Vague, unsettling rumors of King Tiberius falling gravely ill, confined to his chambers. Had the prince taken the throne fully then, or was he ruling in his father's name? Tiberius the steadfast, Tiberius the victorious. It was hard to imagine him laid low. Either way, the command carried royal weight, and it meant the situation in Stonehaven was serious. A cold knot tightened in FaoWind's stomach, serious and likely grim. And why summon him? He thought. Why summon FaoWind DragonFire? He pushed the potatoes around the pan again, more forcefully than needed. He was nobody. A tiller of soil, his hands stained with earth, not blood. The DragonFire name was just that. A name. An echo from a past he barely knew. Tales told by his grandfather of ancestors clad in scale mail, wielding swords forged in dragon heat, fighting shoulder to shoulder with King Tiberius himself. But that was generations ago. The DragonFires had scattered after the war, settling into quiet lives, their legendary fierceness fading into farmers' grit and village squabbles. They hadn't answered a royal summons since Tiberius rewarded their service and effectively released them from courtly duty. So why now? Why break decades, perhaps centuries of silence? A new, perhaps untested king on the throne in Stonehaven, and a summons sent not to some forgotten lordling, but to a dirt farmer bearing the DragonFire name. The coincidence felt too sharp, too deliberate. It tasted of trouble, deep and unsettling, like the first tremor of an earthquake beneath seemingly solid ground. He added a splash of water to the pan, the steam momentarily obscuring his view of the ominous scroll on the table. Whatever was happening in the capital, it was serious enough to reach across the years and leagues, pulling a forgotten name out of the mud. And FaoWind had a sickening feeling he was not being called to Stonehaven for his farming skills. Later that night, nestled in his bed, FaoWind's thoughts drifted like ghosts in the night, haunting him with images of dread and uncertainty, until slowly he drifted off into a deep slumber. The roar echoed, shaking the very marrow in his bones, a furnace heat blooming in his chest. FaoWind gasped, jerking upright on the pallet bed of straw, heart hammering against his ribs. The dream, raw, intense, clung to him like smoke. The roar still seemed to vibrate in the air of the small cottage, though the only sound was his own ragged breathing and the first tentative chirps of dawn birds outside. He ran a hand over his face, finding it damp with sweat despite the pre-dawn chill. Scales, stone walls, the griffin's fiery eyes, and that roar, that dreadful, powerful roar. Shaking his head to clear the lingering images, he saw the faint gray light filtering through the window's grime. The sun was just beginning to break the horizon, painting the dusty air in pale strokes of rose and gray. No time to dwell on unsettling dreams. He had a long road ahead. He moved stiffly, muscles protesting from the previous day's labor and the hard, sleeping surface. He coaxed the embers in the hearth back to life, adding a few sticks of kindling until a small flame flickered reliably. He filled his small, dented pot with water from the bucket and set it on the stones near the fire, adding a pinch of dark, coarse grounds, a rare extravagance, usually saved for the coldest winter mornings. As the water heated, filling the small space with the sharp, bracing aroma of coffee, he double-checked the blanket roll containing his meager supplies. Everything was there, still feeling inadequate for a journey to the capital at the king's command. Why him? The question circled relentlessly in his mind as he watched the water begin to bubble. He wasn't a warrior, wasn't a lordling hiding his name. He was a farmer, yet the summons specified FaoWind of the DragonFire name. The name itself felt like a heavy cloak suddenly thrown over his shoulders. He remembered stories his father used to tell, usually after a few mugs of ale by the fire, his voice low and filled with a reverence FaoWind hadn't understood then. Tales of his grandfather, a stern man FaoWind recalled only vaguely from early childhood, who had fought in the Great War alongside King Tiberius himself. His father spoke of how the DragonFire Clan earned its name. It wasn't just skill with an axe or sword. During the war, deep in the northern campaigns against the savage clans from the frozen wastes, the Icewalkers, his father had called them, though others used different names. His ancestors had stumbled upon a young dragon, cornered and wounded, about to be slaughtered by a hunting party of the northern warriors. Against all odds, the DragonFire warriors intervened, driving off the hunters and tending the young dragon's wounds. This act forged an unlikely, powerful bond. The elder dragons, ancient and wise, repaid the debt. They shared secrets of metalwork, guiding the clan's smiths to fold steel in the searing heat of dragon breath, creating weapons of legendary strength and sharpness, imbued with a faint inner heat. Armed with these blades and filled with a ferocity said to mirror their draconic allies, The DragonFire clan carved a path through the enemy ranks, fighting with the dragon spirit that became their namesake. FaoWind poured the steaming coffee into his lone mug, the heat warming his chilled hands. Dragon breath steel, fighting spirit. It sounded like a myth, a bard's tale sung in taverns. What did that have to do with him, standing in his dirt-floored cottage, preparing to walk 3 days because a king he didn't know had summoned him? The stories felt grand and distant, utterly disconnected from the grit under his fingernails and the ache in his back. He drank the coffee quickly, letting the bitterness jolt him, fully awake. He splashed water on his face, scrubbed his teeth with a frayed twig, and slung the blanket roll over his shoulder, taking one last look around the small, familiar space, the hearth, the table, the empty pallet, a place of quiet solitude that suddenly felt achingly precious. He pushed open the rough wooden door. The morning air was cool and damp with dew. The sky was brightening, promising a clear, hot day. The dusty track stretched out before him, wending away from his field and towards the unknown horizon, towards Stonehaven. With a deep breath that tasted of earth and the coming day, FaoWind DragonFire set out onto the road. The sun had climbed higher, burning off the last of the morning dew by the time FaoWind rounded the familiar bend that brought the Thames farmstead into view. Smoke curled lazily from the cottage chimney, suggesting Alma was busy inside, but Will was already out, guiding his sturdy ox along a furrow in the barley field that bordered the road. The man moved with the same steady, earthbound rhythm FaoWind himself knew so well. Will looked up as FaoWind approached, his hand shielding his eyes against the sun. His weathered face, usually quick with a friendly nod, registered clear surprise as he took in FaoWind's blanket roll and determined stride. He halted the ox with a quiet word and leaned against its flank, waiting. "Morning, Will," FaoWind called out, his voice slightly rough from disuse and the road dust already coating his throat. "FaoWind," Will returned, his gaze sweeping over FaoWind's traveling gear. "Bit early for market day, isn't it? And you look burdened." He gestured towards the blanket roll. "Everything all right?" FaoWind stopped at the edge of the field, the scent of turned earth momentarily reminding him of his own abandoned rows. "All right is a strong word, Will. Something's come up." He hesitated, then decided directness was best. "I received a summons yesterday afternoon." Will straightened up, his brows furrowing. "Summons? From who? The magistrate over some boundary dispute again?" "No," FaoWind said quietly, reaching inside his tunic and carefully pulling out the rolled scroll, holding it so Will could see the dark wax seal. "From Stonehaven, by command of King Valerius." Will's eyes widened. He took a half-step closer, peering at the griffin crest. "King Valerius? FaoWind, what in the blazes does the king want with you?" "I wish I knew," FaoWind admitted, rolling the scroll back up and tucking it away securely. "The messenger didn't say, just that I need to present myself at the Citadel gates within 3 days. 3 days, Will echoed, looking south down the dusty track that eventually led towards the capital. "To Stonehaven? Lad, that's a hard march on foot." I know," FaoWind nodded grimly, "which is why I stopped. Will, I need a favor, a big one." He gestured back vaguely in the direction of his own small plot. "The potatoes need turning, weeding, and the goats need milking. Chickens need feeding. The cottage. I don't know how long I'll be gone, if I'll be—" He trailed off, the uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. Could you look after things? Just keep an eye? I'd give you half the harvest, whatever's salvageable when I get back for your trouble." Will waved a dismissive hand, his expression serious now, the initial shock replaced by neighborly concern. "Don't talk nonsense about shares, FaoWind. A king's summons. That's not something to take lightly. Of course, Alma and I will look after your place. Tend the patch, see to the animals. Don't you worry about that." He peered at FaoWind again. "But 3 days, you'll kill yourself trying to make that walk." A thought sparked in Will's eyes. He pushed himself away from the ox. "Wait here a moment." He strode quickly towards his cottage, disappearing inside. FaoWind shifted his weight, feeling a sliver of hope mixed with the anxiety. Will reappeared moments later, carrying a small, slightly smudged square of parchment and a stub of charcoal. "Right," Will said, bracing the parchment against the cottage wall and scribbling hastily. "Listen, Stonehaven in 3 days walking, near impossible. But a day's hard walk south from here, maybe a bit less if you push it, is my cousin Jared's farm. Good man, Jared. He owes me a favor or two." He finished writing with a decisive flick of the charcoal. "He keeps horses. Good ones, not like this old plodder." He patted the ox affectionately. He folded the parchment carefully and handed it to FaoWind. "You get yourself there by nightfall, or close to it. Give Jared this note. Tell him Will Thames sent you, and you need to get to Stonehaven faster than your own 2 feet can carry you. He'll sort you out with a mount. It'll still be a hard ride, mind, but it gives you a fighting chance of making the king's deadline." FaoWind took the note, the rough parchment feeling like a lifeline. "Will, I thank you graciously. I don't know how to repay you." "Repay me by getting yourself to Stonehaven safely and finding out what this is all about," Will said gruffly, clapping FaoWind on the shoulder. "Now off with you. Daylight's burning, and FaoWind," he said, eyeing him for a moment, "bring yourself back safe, okay, lad?" "I will. Thank you again, Will," FaoWind said, feeling a genuine warmth spread through him despite the grim circumstances. He gave a final nod and turned back to the road, the small parchment clutched tightly in his hand. The journey was still daunting, the summons still inexplicable, but Will's simple, unwavering neighborliness had lightened the load, if only slightly. He adjusted the blanket roll and set off again, his steps eating up the miles towards Jared's farm and the hope of a horse.